I recently had to give up my inheritance from my grandfather to my older brother Nate, which has left me feeling betrayed and angry. Here's what happened. My grandfather passed away last year, leaving behind a substantial estate. His will stated that his assets should be divided equally among his grandchildren. I was set to receive $10,000 and a vintage car I had always admired, while Nate was to get $10,000 and our grandfather's old pocket watch. The trouble began when Nate announced his plan to start a food truck specializing in gourmet grilled cheese sandwiches. He claimed he needed more capital to launch his business, and my parents insisted that I give him my share of the inheritance. They argued that his business plan was more important than my college expenses, despite my protests. I argued that college was not a waste and that I needed the money too. But my parents didn't listen. My mum even suggested that because I had good grades, I could easily secure scholarships, so I didn't really need the inheritance. It was clear they favored Nate's ambitions over my education, which only added to my frustration. Growing up, Nate was always seen as the golden child. He could do no wrong in our parents' eyes, while I was constantly criticized. Nate took advantage of this dynamic and often bullied me, knowing our parents would always take his side. I remember one particular incident when I was 14 and Nate was 21. During a summer break from college, Nate brought some friends over and thought it would be hilarious to lock me in the shed in our backyard during a heat wave. I was trapped there for hours, terrified and dehydrated, while they laughed outside. When I finally escaped and told our parents, they dismissed it as a harmless prank and told me to stop being so sensitive. This pattern of behavior continued throughout our childhood and teenage years. Nate frequently belittled me, stole my belongings, and even sabotaged my friendships by spreading rumors at school. Our parents never intervened, always making excuses for his actions or blaming me for provoking him. When they demanded that I give up my inheritance to Nate, it felt like the final straw. I initially refused, but my dad threatened to cut me off completely if I didn't comply. He said he wouldn't pay for my college or support me in any way if I didn't help Nate out. Feeling cornered and fearing the loss of my education, I reluctantly agreed. The day I signed over my inheritance was one of the worst of my life. Nate grinned smugly, knowing he had gotten his way at my expense, while our parents praised him for his entrepreneurial spirit and barely acknowledged my sacrifice. A week after receiving my share, Nate threw a launch party for his food truck business. Of course, I wasn't invited, but he made sure to send me plenty of photos from the event. The messages that accompanied the pictures were filled with backhanded comments like, "Thanks for your contribution, sis. Couldn't have done it without you. And too bad you missed out on all the fun. Maybe next time." His taunting pushed me to my limit. I knew I needed to do something to make him face consequences for once. That's when I remembered a secret Nate had been keeping from our family. For years during college, Nate became involved with some dubious individuals and participated in a credit card fraud scheme. Although he managed to avoid getting caught, I learned about it when I overheard him panicking on the phone with one of his accomplices. A few years ago, Nate had coerced me into keeping this a secret, threatening to make my life even more difficult if I ever told anyone. Now, with this information, I'm contemplating exposing Nate's past criminal activities to our parents and potentially to the authorities. I understand that doing so could jeopardize his new business and lead to legal trouble, but part of me feels he deserves it after years of tormenting me and exploiting our parents' favoritism. I'm conflicted between feeling justified in my anger and worrying that I might be crossing a line by ruining his business out of revenge for losing my inheritance. Update 1. It's been 2 weeks since my initial post, and a lot has transpired. I want to thank everyone who took the time to respond and offer advice. After much thought, I decided to follow through with my plan to expose Nate's secret. I began by anonymously tipping off my parents about Nate's involvement in the credit card fraud scheme. I created a fake email account and sent them a detailed message outlining what I knew, including dates and names of some of Nate's accomplices. I also suggested they review his old bank statements and social media activity for additional proof. Initially, nothing seemed to change. My parents didn't mention receiving any email, and Nate continued with his business as usual. I began to worry that they might have dismissed the information as a prank, or that their unwavering faith in Nate was preventing them from believing it. However, about a week after sending the email, I noticed a significant change in the atmosphere at home. My parents became unusually quiet and tense, and Nate started spending more time shut away in his room. I overheard muffled arguments coming from my parents' bedroom late at night, but I couldn't make out their words. Things reached a breaking point 3 days ago when my parents finally confronted Nate. I wasn't supposed to be home, but I came back early from a friend's house and ended up overhearing the entire confrontation from my room. My dad was shouting, demanding to know if the accusations against Nate were true. Nate initially tried to deny everything, but as my parents presented more evidence, his lies started to unravel. I listened as Nate finally broke down and confessed. He revealed that he had become involved with the wrong crowd in college. What began as a small scheme had quickly spiraled out of control. He claimed that he had realized the danger and tried to cut ties with the group after only a few months. What shocked me most was my parents' reaction. Instead of the usual support Nate received, they were furious. My mum was in tears, struggling to comprehend why he would engage in such reckless and illegal behavior. My dad was angrier than I'd ever seen him, accusing Nate of betraying their trust and jeopardizing the entire family. The argument dragged on for hours, with Nate pleading for forgiveness while my parents cycled through anger, disappointment, and disbelief. At one point, my dad questioned Nate about the food truck business, asking if any of the fraudulent money had been used to fund it. Nate insisted that he hadn't and that all of that was behind him, but my parents remained skeptical. As the night wore on, I heard them debating their next steps. They were conflicted between reporting Nate to the authorities and trying to handle the situation privately. They worried about the legal ramifications for Nate, but also feared that remaining silent might implicate them in some way. The next morning, an uncomfortable silence settled over the house. Nate stayed holed up in his room, only coming out to use the bathroom. My parents looked drained and conflicted. When they saw me, they tried to maintain a semblance of normalcy, but it was clear that something had shifted in their perception of our family dynamic. Later that day, my mum pulled me aside and asked if I knew anything about Nate's past activities. I pretended to be shocked by the revelation. She hugged me tightly, apologizing for not being more attentive to both of us over the years. For the first time in a long while, I felt truly seen by her. As for the food truck business, it's currently in limbo. My parents have frozen the accounts associated with it while they investigate whether any of the startup money came from illegal sources. Nate is devastated, but this time our parents aren't rushing to fix things for him. I'm still processing everything that's happened. On one hand, I feel a sense of vindication seeing Nate face consequences for his actions. On the other, I'm wrestling with guilt over the pain this has caused my family. I'm also anxious about what might happen if Nate discovers I was the one who exposed his secret. For now, I'm keeping a low profile and focusing on my upcoming move to college. I'm relieved that my parents haven't retracted their offer to help with my tuition, especially now that Nate's business is on hold. I'll update again if anything significant happens, but for now I'm trying to navigate this new, tense family dynamic one day at a time. Update 2. It's been about a month since my last update, and the situation with my family has taken some unexpected turns. I'm writing this from my dorm room at college, where I moved in a week earlier than planned due to the escalating tensions at home. After the initial confrontation about Nate's past, my parents spent several days in a state of turmoil. In a state of shock and indecision, my parents sought the advice of a lawyer friend to understand the potential legal consequences if Nate's involvement in the credit card fraud were to become public. The lawyer explained that while the statute of limitations might shield Nate from criminal charges, there could still be civil liabilities if any victims came forward. This information led my parents to prefer handling the situation privately. They informed Nate that to avoid jeopardizing his future, they would help him make amends under strict conditions. Firstly, they insisted he sell the food truck and use the proceeds to start repaying the stolen money, even if the victims were unaware. Additionally, they required him to seek counseling to address the issues that led to his poor decisions. Nate, recognizing the seriousness of the situation, agreed to their terms and appeared genuinely remorseful, which was a new look for him. Over the following weeks, he worked on selling the food truck and all its equipment. It was a difficult process, and he ended up taking a significant loss on the investment. During this time, I noticed a significant change in how my parents treated both of us. They became more attentive to me, asking about my college plans and showing an interest in my life in a way they hadn't before. Conversely, they were noticeably cooler towards Nate, watching him with wary eyes as if seeing him for the first time. About 2 weeks ago, just as things seemed to be settling into a new normal, another bombshell dropped. Nate's ex-girlfriend Melissa showed up at our house unannounced. I was in the living room when she arrived, and I'll never forget the look of panic on Nate's face when he saw her. Melissa was furious. She revealed that she had recently discovered fraudulent charges on her credit card statement, dating back to when she and Nate were together. After doing some investigation, she had figured out that Nate must have been behind it. She threatened to go to the police if Nate didn't confess and pay her back immediately. Our parents, who were home at the time, overheard everything and were stunned to learn that Nate's crimes included stealing from his own girlfriend. This revelation seemed to be the final straw for them. In a rare show of authority, my dad told Nate he needed to come clean to Melissa and arrange a repayment plan with her. Cornered and with no way out, Nate broke down and admitted everything. He confessed his involvement in the larger fraud scheme and how he had used Melissa's information in it. Melissa was devastated, alternating between tears and anger at Nate for betraying her trust. In the end, my parents stepped in to mediate. They helped Nate and Melissa come to a repayment agreement, with my parents guaranteeing the payments to ensure Melissa was fully compensated. In exchange, Melissa agreed not to press charges, though she made it clear that her relationship with Nate was over for good. This whole ordeal seemed to finally pierce Nate's sense of entitlement. For the first time, he was facing real consequences for his actions. He's been uncharacteristically quiet and withdrawn, spending most of his time working odd jobs to start repaying the money he owes. Watching all this unfold has been surreal for me. I feel a mix of vindication and sadness. While I'm relieved Nate is finally facing consequences, seeing my family in such turmoil has been harder than I expected. My parents, especially my mom, have been reaching out more, apologizing for years of overlooking Nate's behavior and my feelings. I decided to move into my dorm early to get some space from the family drama. My parents supported this decision, helping me move in and making sure I had everything I needed. It feels strange to suddenly have their attention and support after so many years of being overlooked. Nate's shadow. I'm now focusing on starting my college journey and leaving behind the family drama that has plagued me. I haven't told anyone that I was the one who initially exposed Nate's secret, and I plan to keep it that way as I adjust to my new life. I'm hopeful that this fresh start will allow me to build a future free from the shadow of my family's past mistakes. Update 3. It's been about 2 months since I began college, and I wanted to provide a final update on my family situation. A lot has changed, and I feel like I'm finally moving past the drama and focusing on my own life. Nate has been working multiple jobs to repay Melissa and contribute to the fund our parents set up for his credit card scheme victims. This ongoing repayment process has been humbling for him, and I've noticed a significant change in his attitude. He's quieter, more introspective, and seems genuinely committed to making amends for his past actions. My parents have also undergone a transformation. They've been attending family therapy sessions, both with and without Nate, to address the issues that led to their enabling behavior. They've reached out to apologize for the years of favoritism and neglect. While it doesn't erase the past, I appreciate their efforts to make things right. As for me, I'm thriving in college. Being away from home has given me the space I needed to process everything that happened and focus on my own goals and aspirations. I've made new friends, joined some clubs, and am enjoying my classes. It feels liberating to be in an environment where I'm not constantly compared to Nate or overlooked. Last week, I received an unexpected call from my grandfather's lawyer. It turns out there was a clause in his will that none of us knew about. My grandfather had stipulated that if any of his grandchildren were found to, when Nate confessed to his criminal activities, his inheritance was redistributed among the other grandchildren. Consequently, the lawyer informed me that I would be receiving Nate's share of the inheritance in addition to my original portion. I was taken aback by this news. On one hand, It felt like a sense of justice, as if my grandfather had somehow intervened from beyond to protect me. On the other hand, I was conflicted, knowing this would likely stir more tension within the family. When I shared this news with my parents, their reaction was unexpected. Rather than defending Nate or urging me to share the inheritance with him, they supported my right to keep it, stating that Nate's actions had consequences, and this was one of them. Nate was understandably upset when he found out, but to his credit, he didn't lash out or try to guilt me into sharing. He accepted responsibility for his actions and expressed hope that I would use the money wisely. I've decided to use the inheritance for my college tuition and save the remainder for graduate school or future investments. It's empowering to have this financial security, especially knowing I won't have to rely on my parents or worry about student loans. Reflecting on the past few months, I realized that exposing Nate's secret had unforeseen consequences. While it led to family turmoil, it also sparked necessary changes and uncovered long-buried issues. I'm cautiously optimistic about the future of my relationship with my family. We're learning to communicate better and respect each other's boundaries. I'm not sure if Nate and I will ever have a close sibling relationship, but we're at least on civil terms now. For now, I'm focusing on my studies and embracing the opportunities college offers. I'm grateful for the chance to forge my own path and create a life that isn't defined by my family's past mistakes. The future may be uncertain, but I feel more prepared to confront it on my own terms.